What if I told you that the most impressive moment of the Australian Grand Prix was not the victory, but Lewis Hamilton's comeback that left even Ferrari in shock? Because everything seemed pretty clear before the race started. Hamilton started 7th on the grid, still adapting to his new Ferrari, while Charles Leclerc started with better options to fight for the podium. Nobody in the paddock expected the Briton to be the protagonist, at least not yet. But then the race began, and something changed. Lap after lap, Hamilton began to weave his way through traffic with an aggression reminiscent of his better days. While other drivers struggled with tire wear and the strategic chaos that often appears in Melbourne, the 7-time world champion quietly began to build a comeback that few saw coming. What seemed like a normal race for Ferrari ended up becoming a completely unexpected situation. Hamilton began to shave seconds off Charles Leclerc, getting closer and closer in the final laps and making it clear that his pace was even higher in the final stretch. And it was at that moment when the uncomfortable looks began inside Ferrari. Because no one expected that, after starting so far back, Hamilton was just a few laps away from taking the position from his own teammate, something that even surprised Frédéric Vasseur himself after the race. But the big question is this: how did Hamilton manage to transform a start from 7th position into one of the most surprising comebacks of the start of the season? And why within Ferrari could this performance change many things from now on? The Australian Grand Prix has always been an unpredictable race. Albert Park usually punishes any mistake, demands absolute precision, and often transforms the expected script into something completely different. But on this occasion, the story began even before the traffic lights went out, because the classification had already left a very clear signal of what the outlook looked like for Ferrari and especially for Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton arrived at this race still in the process of adapting to his new team. The 7-time world champion faced his first real big challenge dressed in red, and the main objective was simple: continue understanding the behavior of the car, score important points, and stay close to his teammate Charles Leclerc. However, the classification was not exactly easy. Hamilton could only secure 7th position on the grid, a position that forced him to start the race surrounded by traffic and with the need to take risks from the first moment if he wanted to aspire to more than just a discrete result. Meanwhile, the situation for Ferrari seemed much clearer on the other side of the garage. Charles Leclerc had achieved a much more favorable starting position, and everything indicated that he would be the driver in charge of leading the team's aspirations during the race. In that context, many analysts assumed that Hamilton would still need several races to reach the same level of pace as the Monegasque within the Italian team. But Sunday in Albert Park usually has its own logic. As the race began, the field quickly compressed in the opening laps and traffic began to play a key role. Hamilton knew full well that getting stuck behind other cars could ruin any chance of a comeback, so from the start he adopted an aggressive attitude, looking for every available space and prioritizing clean corner exits to maximize traction on the straights. And it was there that the story that few had anticipated began to be built. Little by little, Hamilton began to advance positions with a combination of experience, car control, and a very intelligent reading of the race pace. While other drivers suffered from tire degradation or dirty air from traffic, the Briton managed to maintain a constant pace that allowed him to progressively get closer to the front group. But the key moment came when one of those factors that often completely changes a Formula One race appeared: the virtual safety car. On lap 12, this temporary neutralization was activated and several teams had to make strategic decisions in a matter of seconds. Mercedes reacted immediately and took the opportunity to stop its drivers in the pits, allowing them to make a practically free stop that gave them an important strategic advantage for the rest of the race. Ferrari, on the other hand, decided to follow a different path. The team opted to keep its 2 drivers on the track with the idea of extending the first stint and looking for an advantage in the final part of the race. In theory, this strategy could allow them to attack with fresher tires when the rest began to wear out. But that decision also completely changed Hamilton's role in the race, because from that moment on, the Briton's comeback was no longer just a matter of overtaking cars. It also became a race against strategy, against time, and interestingly, also against his own teammate. And without many realizing it at that moment, Hamilton was already preparing the ground for what would end up being one of the most surprising moments of the Australian Grand Prix. After the strategic moment that changed the course of the race, the Australian Grand Prix began to enter its most interesting phase. Ferrari had decided to stay on the track during the virtual safety car, betting on a longer first stint that could theoretically give them an advantage in the final stretch. But what no one anticipated at that time was that that same decision would end up creating a very uncomfortable situation within the team itself. Because while the rest of the grid reorganized their strategies, Lewis Hamilton began to build something much more important than simple overtaking: Race pace. As the laps progressed, the Briton began to show a consistency that drew attention even from the Ferrari wall. His driving was clean, calculated, and above all extremely efficient with the tires. These were not desperate attacks or risky maneuvers, but something much more dangerous for his rivals, a sustained pace that allowed him to reduce time lap after lap. These types of races are precisely those that have defined much of Hamilton's career in Formula One. He does not always need to lead from the beginning to become a protagonist. Sometimes your most powerful weapon appears as the race enters its second half, when the tires begin to degrade and management becomes more important than pure speed. And that's exactly what happened in Melbourne. When Ferrari finally made its pit stop, Hamilton took to the track again with new hard tires and with a clear mission to make up as much time as possible in the final stretch of the race. From that moment on, a phase began that completely transformed the perception of what was happening. Hamilton began to ride between 10 and 12 final laps with a clearly superior pace, something that quickly began to be reflected in the lap times. Each turn reduced the distance to the front group, and little by little a figure began to appear on the horizon of his timing screen: Charles Leclerc. What at first seemed like a simple coincidence began to become a real threat. Within the Ferrari team itself, they began to realize what was happening. Hamilton, the driver who had started 7th, the one who was still adapting to the car, was now getting dangerously close to the driver who was supposed to lead the team's race. The pressure began to increase, because the more the laps progressed, the more evident something that was not in Ferrari's initial plans became. Hamilton had more pace at that point in the race. His tires were in better condition, his pace was more consistent, and above all, he was entering that type of competitive state that has so often made him one of the most difficult drivers to stop when he smells an opportunity. And suddenly, what had started as a simple comeback turned into something much more uncomfortable for Ferrari. Hamilton was no longer just recovering positions. He was chasing his own teammate. And the most disturbing thing for everyone inside the garage was that, with each passing lap, that distance continued to decrease. It was at that moment when the Australian Grand Prix stopped being simply a complicated race for Ferrari and began to become a story that no one within the team had foreseen. The race was beginning to enter its final laps, and the atmosphere inside Ferrari was beginning to become increasingly tense. What until a few minutes ago seemed like a relatively controlled race for Charles Leclerc was now changing rapidly, because a piece of information appeared on the monitors on the wall that they could not ignore. Lewis Hamilton was getting closer and closer. The difference between the two began to fall lap after lap. Hamilton had been pushing at a very strong pace in the final stretch, making the most of the condition of his new hard tires and showing a consistency that was beginning to jeopardize his own teammates' position. Each lap was slightly faster than the previous one, each sector shaved off a few more tenths, and little by little the chase stopped being a simple possibility and became a completely real threat. At that point, the situation became uncomfortable for Ferrari, because the driver who had started 7th, the one who in theory was still adapting to the car, was now about to catch up with the man who should lead the team's results. And the most disturbing thing was not only the difference on the track, but the feeling that Hamilton had even more pace available. Inside the garage, the first surprised looks were beginning to appear. Ferrari knew that Hamilton was having a very solid race, but even they themselves admitted afterwards that they did not expect him to end up putting pressure on Leclerc like that at the end of the Grand Prix. The Briton's comeback was surpassing any prediction the team had made during the race. Meanwhile, on the track, the chase continued to intensify. Hamilton continued to reduce the distance, pushing with the precision that has characterized him throughout his career. Every corner was executed with precision, every corner exit was optimized to maximize traction, and the stopwatch kept showing the same thing over and over again. The number 44 Ferrari was arriving. But then the factor appeared that ended up defining the outcome of the race: the time. Hamilton's comeback had been impressive, but the race was simply ending too soon. The Briton had managed to get close enough to put direct pressure on Leclerc, but he did not have enough laps left to attempt the final overtake. Finally, Hamilton crossed the finish line in 4th position, a result that at first glance might seem discreet, but which in reality hid a completely different story. Because after the race, Hamilton himself was very clear when analyzing what happened. The Briton was convinced that with just a couple more laps he could have overtaken Leclerc. Their pace in the final stretch had been stronger, and the gap between them was still falling when the checkered flag fell. The Australian Grand Prix left many interesting stories, but one of the most revealing was, without a doubt, the performance of Lewis Hamilton. What began as a complicated race from 7th position ended up becoming a demonstration of experience, strategic intelligence, and competitive pace that few expected to see so early in his time with Ferrari. Because beyond the final result, What was really important was how the race developed. Hamilton knew how to stay patient when stuck in traffic, managing his tires perfectly and waiting for the right moment to attack in the final stretch. And when that opportunity came, he showed exactly why he remains one of the most dangerous drivers on the entire grid as the race enters its decisive phase. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.